Growth is exciting. More customers, more employees, more trucks on the road. It all looks like success. But behind the scenes, many building service contractors are discovering a hard truth. Revenue doesn't automatically translate into profit. In today's episode, we explore why building a bigger company isn't always the same as building a healthier business, and what owners can do to improve profitability without sacrificing growth. And to do that, I'm pleased to welcome regular guest Jeff Carmen with Elite BSC. Jeff, always a pleasure to work with you on these episodes.
Always glad to talk to you, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Let's hope today's conversation helps steer our viewers in the direction that I know you want them to go, but may
Mhm.
find challenging to find. So if you're ready, I have a few questions for you.
Sure, jump in.
All right. So first of all, many contractors, Jeff, celebrate revenue milestones. They measure that.
Mhm.
But you've said many times that growth and profitability aren't the exact same thing. Why do people mistake one for the other? What about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Revenue's visible. I mean, it's good. I mean, it pays. We have to have revenue. It pays the bills. And you think about it. A lot of us talk about our businesses in terms of how much revenue we have. So we did $3 million last year. So it's real visible. The other thing is too, I think if you look around, there's maybe not thousands, but maybe hundreds of videos that talk about growing your company. If you just all you have to do is just YouTube that, but there's not a lot that talk about videos about talking about profit, which is just as important, more important than the revenue piece, maybe just as important. But there is an assumption that growth is always good, and growth is good, but you can grow your company out of business. And so that's the important thing is to understand all of the factors that go into making your company profitable. Revenue is a part of it, but there's a lot of other factors there as well.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you've talked about understanding profitability at the account level. Why is that so important, and what kinds of surprises do owners often discover when they start measuring that?
Yeah, I think a good analogy is this: if you went to the doctor and the doctor came into the room and said, "Gosh, you look great. You must be fine." Well, it really is not telling you what's going on the inside, and so it's important to be able to look into your company's financials and really look into a job level so that you can diagnose where your problems exist on a profitability level, and so you kind of start with having every job, I would say every customer, but it's really every job needs a budget, and budgeted labor hours and those kinds of things that we'll talk about. A couple of surprises that happen. I think the first thing, whenever you start listing out all of your jobs or all of your customers, and you look over and say, "Hey, what are we doing on a profitability standpoint?" The first surprise is the variance that occurs between different, similar size customers. You might have the same size customer on a monthly revenue standpoint, but then when you look over and you look at the profitability or the gross margin on it, they can be wildly different sometimes. So I think that's the first surprise. And the second is in most cases, much larger customers larger customers tend to contribute more towards paying overhead and profitability. I'd take an example where if you have a $500 a month customer that has an 80% margin, that's contributing $400 a month. Where if you have a $5,000 a month customer at 30%, they're contributing $1,500 a month. So it's a larger customer with a gross margin number that's lower, gross margin percentage that's lower, but they're contributing a lot more. So margin here, I would say it this way: percentage tells you efficiency, margin dollars tell you contribution, and you need to look at both. And that's why it's important to look at job costing.
I like that. Good. And I like your doctor analogy because you got to look a little deeper
Yeah,
and
you
ask
do.
questions and
Yeah. If
analyze.
they looked at me, they would think something was wrong.
Very, very good. All right. So you mentioned labor and budget. Let's talk about that. Labor, we know, is contractors' biggest expense. I guess let's say I have a big building with skyscraper, but labor is where the money is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond simply watching payroll costs, what labor behaviors have the greatest impact on profit margins?
So one way to think about this, when you're thinking about labor, in particular, is think about it like a dashboard, like you're driving a car. And so on your dash, you've got a couple of gauges that you want to really keep your eye on a lot. Like, so for instance, think of your labor hours as your speedometer. You want to keep your eye on that all the time. At France, we looked at that every single day. So we had a budget, how many hours we thought we were going to work and how many we were working. And we looked at that on a daily basis. And so I would encourage folks to look at that at least once a week, maybe 3 times a week. But if you can, look at that every single day. That's the most important thing to look at. The second one is think about labor dollars as your gas gauge. So you don't always have your eye on that because that doesn't move as much, but that's important too. And so things like overtime and unplanned wage increases, they can begin to change that. So we need to look at both of those things. And then lastly, just as a side note, just all the other gauges that you might have are things like supplies, those kinds of things. We want to keep our eyes on that, but really it's labor hours and labor dollars is where the game is really won. And we're looking at from a labor hour standpoint, we're looking for patterns. So if we go over budget, if we thought we were going to work 10 hours and we worked 11 hours one night, we're not going to run out there. But if we look and we go 11 hours, and then the next night we go 11 and the next night we go 13, that's probably a time for that account manager or field leader to go out to the building while the people are working and see if they're doing things outside the scope, if they're being efficient with, going back to the janitor's closet a lot, or maybe they have a piece of equipment that's not working. And so that's how we want to approach that. It's kind of like this. Don't wait till the engine light comes on. Be looking at those things and run out there to make sure that you've got everything in order.
Jeff, as you were talking, I was thinking we always ignore the oil change light, though. Always
That
ignore that.
always, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. I do as well.
But no, good analogy. You need to pay attention to all those different signals
That's
and
right.
investigate. It sounds like
That's right.
when something's weird.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right, so let's talk about companies growing. Pricing discipline may slip. Why does that happen? And what systems can owners put in place to protect their margins while remaining competitive?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And sometimes I use a little graphic that it's a three-legged stool, and there's 3 legs to the stool. One is the labor hours. One of those is how much we're paying our team or labor dollars, and the other one is what the customers are going to pay. And so you kind of have to keep all of those legs in balance, or it'll fall over. And so what happens is really there's 3 things. The owners get busy. I mean, they're busy trying to take care of customers and make sure they're not losing customers and a lot of other things that are going on. So they're busy. The second piece is they're afraid of losing a contract. They don't want to ask her for a price increase because that might open up an opportunity to say, if you're going to charge me more, then I might need to look around. And then the third part is they don't have a plan. And so the fix to this is to develop for lack of a better word, a pricing plan or a pricing strategy based on bands of monthly recurring revenue. And what I mean by that is this. All of us need to have something that says, hey, if I've got all my customers at $1,000 a month, for example, then these folks need to be at a 50% gross margin or higher. And then you go to the next level, which would be 1,000 to 5,000. I'm just making these numbers up. And the target there would be 40% gross margin. And so what that does is that allows you to put a plan together and stack all of your customers and say, hey, here's 3 or 4 customers in this year that we need to do a price increase on, or we need to adjust it by this much. And so and I said, that 3 or 4 that you need to do this year. I'm going to correct that by saying, I think it's a good plan to approach customers annually with price adjustments. I just worked through a situation with a fella that's in our group, and he had not adjusted his prices in a few years because some of the margins were staying pretty healthy. Then all of a sudden, his margins aren't as healthy, and he has to go back and ask for a big percentage increase. And so I think it's good practice to look at that every year. You don't have to adjust everybody, but I think it's a good practice to be thinking about doing it every year, even if you can't get it from the customer.
Small bites are easier to swallow, that's for sure. And Jeff, you're full of analogies today. We have the doctor, the dashboard, and the three-legged stool. Maybe there's another
That's
one still to come.
right. That's right. Well, let me mention this too. When we approach customers, I think it's important to remind them of the good work and to let them know that the money that's coming from this price increase, for the most part, is going to pay the team members. And you can say, when we're able to keep market prices or market wages, that leads to less turnover and greater consistency for you. So it's reframing it as, hey, these are rising business expenses. It's not just me as an owner wanting to put more money in my pocket.
Totally makes sense. Everyone wants workers to make a good living, so
That's
I
right.
like that.
Yep.
All right, that's it for my questions. Any final thoughts to share as we close?
Just I would say make job costing a job costing a habit. Look at it all the time. Keep your eyes on the dashboard. Don't be afraid to adjust pricing when it happens. And then this is a low margin. The owners who do well in this business are the people who know their numbers cold, because in low margin business, every penny matters.